everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history with me, Shane McInnes, your least likely guy to have a Twitch stream. Hey, Steph Anomaly, how's it going? How is everybody? Got Arcadian in the room, Steph Anomaly, Fidelia. How's it going, everybody? Hope everybody's doing all right. I am happy to say that we are not currently being wrecked by a hurricane, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, that means other people are currently in the process of, the hurricane, but not us. Wait, who's hosting today? Shane again? I know. It's like that guy just won't flip it and get off the Twitch. Yeah, it was looking pretty grim. The hurricane was kind of hovering off the coastline, and it was gaining strength, and then it just decided to take a big hook and basically dodged us almost completely. So it is what it is. I'm not going to complain. I have so far had a pretty good day. I didn't have to go into work. I don't have to go into work tomorrow. I still got to do grading stuff and do online teaching, so it's not like I'm off. But any day that I can sit here and hang out with my wife and the puppy and, go to the bathroom whenever I feel like it and not have to wear a mask around all day, these are good times. How's everybody else? I see Arcadian's cooking. What's for dinner, Arcadian? Brittany and I made jambalaya tonight, which was super tasty. Hey, Graythar, how's it going? And hey, Joey. I don't think I actually said hello to Joey. How are you all? Who's behind tonight's title, though? That's the big question. Oh, that's actually mine. Yeah, I completely own that one myself. That one was 100% me. Stream looks like it's being a little funky. It looks like it caught back up. Okay. Knocking on heaven's door. We'll get there. There's actually another level of goofy to that. Well, I mean, if it doesn't get stuck in your head, is the title really even worth it? If it doesn't make you go, oh, what's the point? Miso soup? I like miso soup. Brittany is a bigger fan of miso than I am, but I also decided to make eggs and hash browns because I am that hangry right now. Hey, eggs and hash browns are always a good combo. Protein helps counter the angry part of the hangry. Eggs and hash browns. Sounds like a good plan. And miso could be heavy. Not all miso is super light. Good to hear the hurricane missed. Yeah, KP is actually on the coast, but he also, so he's further south than I am, and therefore technically more in the way of the hurricane itself. But he got a little bit of rain and some wind, but not any of the really big storm part. So he's doing fine as well. We've been in contact. We talked a lot today. But thanks for asking. That's a good question. All right, everybody. So the stream is Adventures in History. If you're not familiar, we talk about history stuff, and we make bad jokes and puns and pop cultural references and have a good time and just goof off. It's not a lecture. I like to call it a guided conversation because I really do like it when people pitch in and talk. I don't think that history has to be boring. I think history can be fun and goofy. And people are people. And usually we do viewer request episodes every other week, but we've been doing them now for a month. This is the 4th viewer request episode in a row. And we've got another one next week, and then another one the week after that, theoretically. So I've been a busy man. With the COVID mess. He's doing okay. He's doing better. Still having some fever issues, still having some fatigue issues, but but not. It hasn't progressed any. It hasn't gotten any worse. He is at least at the same level. History courses were my favorite core classes in college, so you're here for... I'm here for this. Well, I'm glad that you're here for this, and I'm glad that everybody's here for this. I'm glad everybody's got the opportunity to come hang out. So, there's that. All right, so this viewer request is a little bit of an odd one. I'll be honest, when it popped up as being chosen, I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do this one. Like, what's the history of metal? Like, not even metal music, which would be a lot easier to do, but just the history of metal stuff. Like, how do you talk about that? So I kind of had to bend my brain a little bit, and I came up with a bit of a formula, and we'll get into it here in a bit. I think I've got some interesting stuff. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the longest of viewer request streams that we've had so far, but I do have a lot of pictures, which I know makes my wife very, very happy. She's all about the pictures. But I've been able to find a lot of neat stuff to show you all. I think that this is going to be better than my initial fears led it out to be. So, metallurgy. Yeah. It's a fun word to say. But so very briefly, before we get going, anybody want to do anything point wise? And as always, you can bring up the adventure points anytime you get ready to. Don't feel bad about derailing me or interrupting me. Yeah, do it. It's fine. I don't really care. If you saw how my brain operated on the inside, you would be surprised that I could string sentences together sometimes. I had to Google metallurgy. Hey, it's 8 p.m. Everybody go follow 8 p.m. He's a cool guy. We raided in last week, and he was in the middle of something called a hype party, which was perhaps the most hype thing that I've ever seen in my life. It was lots of masks, some horse head dabbing, which I didn't know was possible, but sure, why not? It was an interesting moment for certain. I really didn't know what was going on, but it was an interesting stream. It took him like 5 minutes to catch his breath afterwards. Welcome, my friend, welcome. Yeah, we're talking about banging around on metal tonight and how humans have used it in history. You didn't know what was going on either? So 8 p.m. usually what happens when we get ready to raid is I take suggestions from the crowd. So I look at who I'm following, and I usually don't like to drop viewers into people's rooms that I haven't been into myself. So I got them with Three-Eyed Deer and Pipe Smoking Frog, and they were like, yeah, Pipe Smoking Frog. And we landed in, and it was just like... Good times. Good times. So, there's that. Don't forget that you have adventure points. I guess they're actually below. Wait, this way? Are they this way? This way? Yeah. Down below your chat window, click the little adventure hat. You have adventure points. You can do stuff with those. Lots of goofy stuff, not just the sort of generic twitchy things. But there you go. All right, so let's talk metal. Feel free to throw in comments, be goofy, say what you need to say. Say what you need to say. Everything's a song or a movie quote or something like that around here. You guys know that. All right, so first off, what is metallurgy? It's working metal, right? You go out in the yard, you find a hunk of something, you got to do something with it, right? You can't just use it as it is. So, working metal. And this is not something that is easy to do. And especially when we're talking about the ancient world, this junk is hard. And I'm not just talking about like metal being hard, but for real, like the process is hard. We get super spoiled in today's world because we have like aluminum cans and, you know, you go to the supermarket when you're expecting a hurricane and you buy Vienna sausage and it comes in this neat little tin. But that stuff is modern and mechanical. And honestly, if we're just really looking at it, that sort of stuff is just recently turning about 100 years old. So in the span of human history, that stuff is super new, right? If we go back in time, working with metal is difficult. They don't have a lot of the technology that we have. They don't have half of the stuff that we have when it comes to being able to like smith and smelt and anneal and temper and all these great words that we'll talk about later on. So this is automatically just going to limit what they can use, right? In today's world, if we want to make steel, we go to a steel plant and we cook up a whole bunch of chemicals in a giant vat and we pour it out of these giant, kilns and stuff like that. They didn't even have a fire that would melt iron originally, so you can't just go whip up a sword. It's not like you can go to Swords R Us and buy a sword. You gotta make it. And so first off, then you gotta find the metal to begin with, right? And it's not like we can just go walk around in the yard and pick up a hunk of metal big enough to make a sword out of. Where do you even find the metal to flip and begin with, right? Well, you gotta dig it up. But if we go dig a hole, what do we use? A shovel. Guess what? That shovel is made of metal, right? So how do you even dig it up? Or a pickaxe. Guess what? Pickaxe is made out of metal too. So you're stuck with like your hands or stone tools, which kind of sucks, right? Because if you're down in a hole and friggin' dig it up, yeah, there we go. I have enough points for a viewer request. What to request, though? History of sausage? Oh, man. History of sausages would be horrible. I don't even know what I would do with that. Didn't they use stone? Yeah, they used stone. But the thing about stone is it is naturally not as hard as metal. So to even get this stuff out is a pain in the butt. And you're even further limited because a lot of the metal that we use today doesn't occur naturally in the earth. So like today we have aluminum cans, and aluminum cans are friggin' everywhere, right? Use the peasants. Oh, what job can't be solved by throwing peasants at it, right? History of 18th century dress? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm open for whatever the viewers request. That's why we have the viewer request episodes. Oh, peasants, go mine you. Peasants get sick of mining you. It's a lot easier in the ancient world if you have slaves or children. We'll talk about children a little bit later, which is kind of sad, but ancient world, not always so cozy, right? All right, so I was talking about aluminum. Most of the aluminum that we use doesn't come out of the ground as pure aluminum. It comes out of the ground as this mineral called bauxite, and we have to go through an entire process to actually extract the aluminum out of the bauxite. But to do that, we have to have modern chemical processes, which we didn't invent until like the 1800s, right? So you're not going to go back in time and find an aluminum sword. They just don't have it. A lot of the other metals that we use today are also in that similar strait, where you can't just go dig up a whole bunch of something like cobalt or magnesium. It just doesn't really occur naturally. Hey, Gene, how's it going, man? Motivate with their religion, cheaper than slaves. Or enslave them with a religion and get double the dip bonus. Good old caste systems. Welcome, Gene. So how do you do this? Well, there are certain metals that are called native metals. All right, and native metals are going to be ones that are frequently found in the ground in their pure form, right? So you could go dig these up and find like a vein of these, or find a line of this in the ground. And there are several of them. And we'll kind of go through these. You all know that I can't talk and type at the same time. Give me just a second. All right, so here are the native metals that are going to be used in the old world: gold, silver, lead, copper, tin, iron. These are frequently found in the Earth's crust, high enough in the Earth's crust that you could get to them just by maybe digging around in a cave, but they're also going to be pure enough that you can kind of use them straight away, right? Copper. It's actually the first one that we'll talk about. Copper is the first one of these native metals that people start using. And there's a reason for that, all right? First off, copper is soft. I mean, it's a metal, right? So it's not like you can sit here and roll it between your hands. But when we're talking about metal density and metal hardness compared to something like iron or even something like, silver, it's not going to be as hard. It's kind of malleable, right? And there is an entire period of time that's sort of between the end of the Neolithic Age and the beginning of the Bronze Age that we call the Chalcolithic Age, which is a super horrible name. And it basically just means the Copper and Stone Age. Yeah, so it kind of overlaps. And the reason that it's easy to use to begin with, again, it's soft, but it's also very, very common in the ancient world. So when we're talking about the ancient world, where this stuff is first really kicked off, we got to go to the map. Like Dora. Map. We're talking about this region over here, where our civilizations first show up. The Near East, places like Africa, places like the Mediterranean coastline right here, places like Mesopotamia and Turkey and Greece. Copper and stone sounds very fashionable. The cocoa and linty age. Not quite, but close. Copper and stones does sound very fashionable. And in fact, I have a picture for you. So one of the things that I did, and this is going to sort of get into the formula that I mentioned earlier, I sort of set up an idea of how I wanted to cover all of these metals, these native metals. And the idea was I would sort of give you a little bit of a spill about what kind of metal they are, and then I would talk about the oldest artifact that we have. I would talk about the oldest mine that we have located for this, and then I would talk about the first time we can find it being smelted, which means melted down and then used in a form to create something that's made out of a cast. And this image that we're looking at right here is not only the oldest copper artifact that we have ever discovered in history, but it is literally the oldest metal artifact that we have ever discovered in history. And it is made out of copper. It is a pendant. Now, the stuff that we're seeing around it, like the fitting here and this twine, these are modern. It's on display right now, but this actual piece of copper right here came with the hole in it and was originally a pendant. And it came out of a grave that was in northern Iraq. So let me switch back over to streaming so we can show this on the map here. Northern Iraq, right about here. And the grave itself was dated to about 8700 BC. So that puts the first metal artifact roughly 11,000 years old. And that's a long flipping time ago, right? We don't get cities until about 4500 BC. So this is people making stuff out of metal almost 6,000 years before we had cities. Yeah, it's pretty friggin' old. It's not a spatula. An ancient spatula for cooking. I wonder what the oldest spatula is. I'm going to have to go look that up now. Oldest spatula in history. History of cooking utensils. So 8700 BC, or about 10,700 years ago, we get copper artifacts being made. Now, that's different than having a copper mine, right? Mining copper is a different scenario. You can't just because you find an artifact made out of copper doesn't necessarily mean that people are mining it, right? You could theoretically find a boulder on the surface that gets exposed during something like an earthquake that's got copper in it. Or you might be able to walk down a deep ravine that's been cut by a river, something like the Grand Canyon, and maybe find some copper in the walls and kind of hack it out a little bit and get some copper. Are you going to discuss the use of iron pyrite? Nodules formed by anaerobic bacterial colonies in Cretaceous mudflats have been used by people as raw material for making simply metal tools. Yeah, we'll talk about... I don't think we'll get fully over into pyrite, but we will talk about meteoric iron. So, can copper be shaped using stone? Yeah, you can just kind of bash it into shape using, brute force, basically. You get a big old rock, and you can bash some stuff flat. Yep. It's not going to be easy. I think with enough heat from a campfire, you can smack it with rocks into shape. Well, see, campfires aren't really hot enough to melt this sort of metal, even copper. The melting point of copper is probably higher than any campfire is naturally going to be. The invention of smelting is something that we'll talk about towards the end, and it actually involves a lot of science. Like, these people have to think about how to make things hotter, and they have to understand basically like thermodynamics and fire and stuff like that with very, very little concepts of the science that we understand today. Meteoric iron was going to be the next question. Hard to do on industrial scale, but it's very pure iron. It's got nickel and cobalt in it, though. It would probably soften it. Yeah, it'd probably make it soft. You could probably... I don't know how far it would melt it, though. You're not going to be able to fully melt any of these metals with just a campfire. You're going to have some additional level of technology to get it hot enough. And we'll talk about bellows, and I've actually got a really awesome picture to show you of some of the earliest version of bellows that exist. Pretty cool stuff. Very excited about it. All right, so that was your pendant. What about mining? Where are we going to first find mining? Well, there is a region in Israel called the Timna Valley. And this is the oldest region in the world where we know for certain that copper mining was taking place. And as we can see here, this wasn't even really completely what you might consider an underground mine. What's happened here is that because of water erosion, you've got this really hard level of rock, and it has these sort of natural water passages inside of it. But what this would do is expose natural veins of copper that people could kind of crawl around through these little tunnels and stuff like that and hack out with rocks, or even break the sides of the walls down to expose the copper. And we have evidence, and you can actually see ancient carve on the wall here, some markings and things like that. These are much, much more common meaning relative to today. The first and oldest evidence of copper mining at this site dates back to about 7,000 BC. So that's still about 2,500 years before we have cities. People are at Timna Valley, and they're hacking copper out of these rocks. Pretty wicked cool stuff, in my opinion. Maybe in your opinion, too. I don't know. You get to decide. All right, so copper mines go back about 7,000 years. But what about smelting? Where are you going to first see it happening? Well, there is a location that is in Turkey, and I was not able to find any good pictures of it. It's a place called Tel Magzalia, and according to the artifact reports and the archaeological reports that I read, they found evidence of copper casting and smelting going on at Tel Magzalia. It's in south central Turkey. Zoom in a little bit here on the map, especially this region right around in here. There's going to be a lot of mining done in that area, and I've actually got a map that I'll show you about some more. Hey, it's Buttery Smooth. I'm Spartacus. Hey, Buttery Smooth. How's it going, my friend? Everybody? You should go follow Buttery Smooth. Very polite British chap. Does amazing amazing lifelike photorealistic artwork. Give him a follow. He's open for commissions. If you have any sort of portraiture, he does pet portraits. Go follow him on the Instagram. His Instagram, and Buttery, if you want to throw some of your emotes in there, people can follow those too. If you want to drop Instagram links, his Instagram and his Twitter are so buttery smooth. You need to go follow this guy. Give him some love. Send some people his way. He's a cool guy. So, thank you very much, Buttery, by the way. And I hope you're doing well, my friend. We're talking about metal. Digging around in the dirt. Good stuff.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Now everybody's Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. And you can be Spartacus too. Thanks for the gift sub, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very, very kind. Very kind. Oh, now you're just making me...
Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! Spartacus!
Buttery, you're making me in the feels, my friend. Very generous. Very generous. Thank you, sir. I raise my glass of water to you. Very kind. I have a hard time with the generosity thing. Super cool. Many thanks, Buttery. I hope that whiskey treats you well. Thank you. Seriously. You make my heart warm. Speaking of hearts of gold, let's talk about gold. Gold is a neat metal. It is fairly soft.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks.
And tanks. You're welcome. Now you're just... Buttery, my friend.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
Now I know how you feel when people do this to you.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
We've got a few more of these.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
Buttery, my friend.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
Bit wall completed.
You shall have
Oh, man.
horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
Yeah, I am red now.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
I don't know if everybody recognizes where that little bit
You shall have
comes
camels,
from.
horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles,
And tanks.
You're welcome.
From one of my favorite Indiana Jones movies.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles,
And
tanks.
tanks.
You're welcome. You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort,
Atlantis.
provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks. You're welcome.
people would have a problem with smelting the metal, deoxidizing it, but also separating it from the mother rock could have been affected with metals people ever obtained in a fuse. Thank you, Buttery Smooth. You are a gentleman and a great guy. I feel like I need to express the fact that this is actually Buttery the way that he is all of the time. You go hang out in his channel, and he learns who you are, and he puts you with people, and he'll say like, "Hey, you said something about you write poetry. Well, this other person that's in the room also writes poetry, and you two should message each other and write some poetry together." Or, hey, you said you like music, and I know this other person over here does recording stuff, so maybe you should talk to so-and-so and do some music recording. And this guy, this is a good guy. Well, you can stay around as long as you want to. I know that you, being in England, are well into the small hours of the morning. Many thanks, my friend. You're a great guy. And you should go follow him. Top guy. All right. Let me see if I can compose myself now and continue talking about metal. Gold is prized in the ancient world because it doesn't tarnish very quickly, if at all. It can be shined into a very, very bright shine. I don't know much about what the rock copper tin is found in, but since gold did some exploring mines at the Colorado years ago, some hard rock. Yeah, gold is found in some pretty hard rock. But because of the geological activity in most of the Near East, especially down in Africa and Central Africa, down here where a lot of the ancient gold comes from, you can't see that. Right down in here, and a little bit over in here, and a little bit up in here. This geological activity brings a lot of that hard rock pretty close to the surface and frequently breaks it up. So you're going to see gold being used pretty early, but it's not going to be the kind of the first thing that you run into. So what is the first gold thing that we have? Well, it turns out that, and this is just a recent discovery, by the way, this little guy. And I know this looks kind of like a lame little piece of gold, but this was discovered at a place in Bulgaria called Tel Unicita. And it is the oldest gold artifact that we have currently dated, and it is about 4500 BC. And it's just a little bead. All the way across, it's only about a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, but it is clearly worked. I mean, you're not going to find this naturally occurring in the ground as such. You can tell that it's been bent and kind of hammered in. I actually do have a picture of the location where it was dug up here. This is the actual dig site. Pretty interesting stuff. I don't know if you all have ever seen archaeological dig sites, but that's pretty much the way that they look like. A bunch of people wallowing around in the dirt. But 4,500-year-old gold is pretty neat stuff. If we look at the first evidence of mining gold, though, we're going to have to move a little bit into Central Asia to a place, I was going to say that's what they all look like. Yeah, pretty much. Just wallowing around in the dirt, people with odd tools that you would normally not expect. Like here's a paintbrush and just kind of a weird improvised shovel, and this guy's using a knife. And I guarantee you somebody on this has a toothbrush somewhere. There's a trowel. Yeah, this is pretty much archaeology. So this beautiful looking hill here is at a location in the modern day country of Georgia, And it is a place called the Sakdritsky Mine. And if you were to walk up this little hill right here, there's a big hole where you can go down inside of this hill, which is kind of a natural outcropping in this larger kind of geological formation. And this is the oldest evidence of mining gold that we have. And it is about 3500 BC. So that's a good 5,500 years old. So to kind of give you a perspective of what we're looking at here. So the Tel Unicita location is over here in Bulgaria. Let me throw the modern borders on. I'm sure everybody knows Balkan geography, but here's Bulgaria right here. And it's actually kind of over in this area. Now, Sakdritsky is in this country right here, which is Georgia. And it's a little bit in kind of this region over here. So, still in the ancient world, still adjacent to the ancient world. But Georgia also, by the way, random little history fact for you, has the oldest existing evidence of winemaking about 8,000 years ago. So people even way back in the day, or maybe it's 6,000 BC. No, 6,000 BC would be 8,000 years ago. So it's 4,000 BC. God, math is not my thing. That's why I went into history. So archaeology is a grown-up sandbox, apparently. Basically. So would mining have originated in geologically active areas where fissures would have naturally exposed ore? That's the theory. Places where there were already deep parts of the earth where metals would have formed that had been brought up closer to the surface. So if you look at a lot of the locations that I'm going to point out tonight that are mines, they're going to be in areas that are prone to things like earthquakes, and had at one time or another been like a crustal boundary between one plate or another, where a deep plate had been pressed up by plate tectonics closer to the surface. Wine and jewelry are priorities. Says my wife, who very rarely wears jewelry, and doesn't need to because she's beautiful enough as it is. And I wouldn't say that just because I'm on stream. I'd tell her that to her face too, and then she'd go. When we come to like actual metal and gold melting, around 2500 BC, at a burial site in Egypt at a place called Saqqara, we actually have a really neat tomb painting that I can show you. And this is going to be a little bit of a preface to the smelting discussion that we'll have later. But what you see here, so if we ever run out of metals, we just have to make tectonic plates move again. Well, they're still moving. They're just moving really slowly. Every year, Europe moves further away from us, and we move closer to Russia. In North America, that is. So Alaska and Russia are moving towards each other at the space of about, I think it's about 0.64 centimeters a year. Or something like that. Not very fast. Some modern mining is still in places that, like that, Antigua, Guatemala. Yeah. And we'll talk, Gene, we'll talk about some mines later on that are still being used today as well. Both materials are mined from the areas near a tectonic plate boundary. Yeah. We need to speed up the process. Maybe if we all got out and pushed. Speed this thing along a little bit. All right, so what we can see here is we have a fired basin, and all of these guys have these really friggin' long spout/straw looking things. And what they're actually doing is they are blowing extra oxygen into this fire so that they can melt this stuff right here, which, based on the inscriptions, we know it's gold. And this is a precursor to good old-fashioned smelting. You don't use necessarily mechanical processes to make the the flames hotter. You just blow into them. You get 6 guys with really long straws, and you blow yourself silly like you're trying to inflate a pool raft, you know? Of course, now we have these great little things where we can plug into the wall and just hit a button and it goes and inflates everything. But some of us are old enough to remember having to inflate things by blowing into the little plastic thing ourselves. And I think that we all know how quickly you can go out of breath doing that. Well, imagine if you're having to blow into a fire for 20 or 30 minutes to get this little plate hot enough so that the gold melts in it. You're going to blow yourself silly, which is why they then go on to build mechanical bellows, but we're not quite there yet. Blowing up the pool floaties was like getting high for 11-year-olds. And again, use the peasants. Peasants, blow into my fire. Oh, peasants. Once again, is there not a problem that you can't solve by throwing peasants at it? I really do feel bad for the peasants of the ancient world. They got crapped on by everyone. It's just not the good stuff. All right, so there's gold. Let's talk about lead. One of the potential titles for tonight was "Get the Lead Out," and it was going to be a pun because, like, you have to get the lead out. You know what the pun is. It was a bad pun. I think the one that we settled with was a little bit better. The peasants of the modern world don't have it a lot better. No, they don't. And there are still people out there that are stuck in both class and actual slavery, and we need to be cognizant of that. I assume they would have invented some sort of mechanical thing at the most basic level. Yeah. And I've got a picture of one, Graythar, and I'll show you in just a bit. Arrives, you're going to blow yourself silly. Gets ready to run. Welcome to Adventures in History. Magnificent 1997. Welcome, Magnificent. I'll show you what we were talking about again. I was talking about using breath power to increase the heat of a fire so that you might use it to smelt metal. So if you had to continuously blow into this pipe, you would blow yourself silly. Not the other thing. I try to keep the stream PG. Let It Go. That would have been a good one. I didn't even think of that one, David Peterson. Welcome, David Peterson. Everybody go follow David Peterson. Great artist. Friend of the channel. And friend. So, what about lead? Letters to no one. David Peterson over here with a big brain. Yeah, he's a pretty creative guy. So, the oldest lead items that we have are some beads. And this is going to blow your mind. Look there. Look at how sexy that is. Ooh, those are nice beads. This is from an ancient site in Turkey called Çatalhöyük, which we've actually talked about previously in the thread or in the channel. And you don't see it right now, but I am wearing the adventure hat. Okay, using breath before rocket stove type designs. Yes, absolutely. We're talking about super ancient smelting stuff, all the way back into like the 3500, 2500 BC range. So this is located at a Turkish place called Çatalhöyük, which looks like this. Really cool ancient site. You hear lead is pretty tasty. You're not supposed to eat the lead. I'm wearing the adventure hat because Çatalhöyük is in Turkey, and I have seen the ruins of Çatalhöyük. For those of you that might be new to the show, when I get to talk about places that I have been or seen, I get to wear the adventure hat, which is the hat that I take with me when I go on adventures. Because I am very pasty white, I burn incredibly rapidly, and I need as much protection as I can humanly wear. The adventure hat is near and dear to my heart. I love it more than I should love inanimate objects. It's been to, I think, 10 different countries and 3 different continents with me. So, yeah. Have we talked about lead poisoning yet? No, we haven't been to lead poisoning. They did stop using lead as drinking and eating utensils pretty quickly in the ancient world, though. They put that together like, yeah, we shouldn't drink out of that. It's just not good. So I am wearing the adventure hat. This is Chatal Huyuk. It is an ancient village. It was populated between about 7500 BC and 5700 BC. Really neat place, but also where we found these first items of lead. These little lead beads that I just showed you. So now I get to take the adventure hat off. And also, if you have the points below you in the chat window, you can click on the little adventure hat logo beside your adventure points, and you can summon the adventure hat, which involves you clicking the button, and then I put the adventure hat on and I tell you a story about some great place that I've been or seen. And I can even try to tailor that story. I've been asked, where's the best hamburger that I've ever had in the world? And tell me something embarrassing that happened to you. Lead was used to sweeten wine. That's how lots of wealthy Romans got poisoned with it. Yeah. There we go. But it's so dang useful. It is. You can use it for lots of stuff because it's another one of these softer metals. It's easy to work. You can maneuver it around. You can make it into a lot of different stuff. It is a native metal. It doesn't take a lot to mine it out. And in fact, lead is the oldest mined metal in the history of mankind. And in fact, I have a photograph of the oldest mine that we have ever found on Earth. It is a place in a country called Swaziland, which is in the southern part of Africa. And it is a place called the Ngwenya Mines. This particular location is called the Lion's Cave, which is the oldest of the Ngwenya mines. This is a currently active mining site. If you Google Ngwenya Mines, you will see modern excavations. It's still very active for lots of different metals, lead and iron. But this is the oldest mine and the oldest location on Earth where we have actual evidence where people were removing metal from the Earth. And wait for it, it was in 39,000 BC. I said that right. 39,000 BC. 41,000 years ago, human beings were removing lead from this mine to use for stuff. So there you go. Ngwenya Mines. BBC Tudor Farm goes into lead mining in an interesting way. That would be an interesting thing to check out. I have seen a couple of those episodes. I have not watched all of them. I will admit that I have been very sidetracked by less intellectual pursuits. I've been watching that Mitchell and Webb look again, which is... It's not really academic, but it's full of chuckles. I was like, oh, I want to watch British stuff. And I was like, I should watch that Tudor Farm thing that David was talking about. And then it was like, I want to chuckle. And then I'm on season 2 of that Mitchell and Webb look already, which is a really funny show. David Mitchell, Robert Webb, very, very funny stuff. The whole thing's on YouTube. You can watch it all. It's a good show. So lead mines, oldest mines in history, very, very old. And we do have a pretty old lead artifact. And this one is actually kind of weird here. So let me skip over to it. What we see here is a lead, and what the excavators are calling it is a lead wand. Because this part right here is a smelted and cast piece of lead. And this is a wooden handle. OMG, you know him and his wife, Vicky. You know whom? David Mitchell or Robert Webb? If so, tell them that I am humongous fans and I've seen all of their shows. Except for the newest one that I really just located because of David, who told me about it a minute ago, or actually a couple of days ago. But this, I don't really know what this is for, right? That's the question. I don't want to even necessarily speculate what this is for because, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to keep this BC. I'm sorry, PG. Right? You know David Mitchell's wife and David Mitchell. That is amazing. magnificent. He is a very, very funny guy. I love watching him on quiz shows. I like Peep Show. I like his radio show that Mitchell and Webb Sound, his TV show, Mitchell and Webb Look. Good stuff. I adore Upstart Crow, his most recent work. Quite funny stuff. He has a fan in the States. David Peterson is asking for clarification, like, do you call them on the telly? David Mitchell is your spirit Brit. That's great. So this wand thingy here is dated to about 6000 BC. And it was discovered in a region of this southern part of Israel and western part of Egypt called the Negev, this sort of deserty region over here. I know them. I've worked with Victoria more than David. Well, there we are. Small world after all. This is why I love Twitch, by the way. There are cool people all over the flippin' world, and we can run into them. Just bump into them and say hey. And hang out. And be cool. And talk about lead wands. Right? So, there's lead. Wand. Yeah, see, Stephanomaly, the quote marks are exactly what I was hoping we wouldn't have to talk about. I don't know what they use that for. Maybe it was an actual wand with magical properties. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It might not have been a wand, though. And now we'll move on. And now for something completely different. That's a Monty Python joke. Let's talk about tin. Tin pots, like tin pot dictators, which is a bit too real for the world that we live in today in the States. So, sorry about that. Tin. It's a native metal. It's found in the ground in native form. But here's the thing about tin. It's really rare. You do not find it in a lot of ancient places. It is really hard to come by, even though it's essential to making bronze. We'll talk about alloys in a little bit. If I made a lead wand, it would be a wand. Thank you, David. But would you make it, or would the Dad Treepins make it? That's the question. So tin is hard to come by in the ancient world. And because of that, we don't have a lot of unique tin items, right? Because by the time tin becomes sort of a thing and people kind of realize that, hey, we can use this, they had also discovered copper because they had been using copper for a longer period of time. And then they kind of figure out the big, like, bing, light bulb moment where you can melt copper and tin and mix it together and then make bronze. And that's like the bajillion good things, right? Woodsmen have been made of tin. There we are. But that's in fictional worlds. Assuming Oz is fictional. We don't know. We've never been over the rainbow before. Sometimes I feel like we've been through the looking glass and we're kind of living in it, and we're being led by the Jabberwock. But that's political opinions, and I'm not wearing the opinion hat. For those of you also new to the show, there is also the opinion hat. And if you would like me to give my opinion on something, you will first be warned and then submit the request, and then I will put the opinion hat on and give you a full blast of opinion. The opinion hat is for later. But that's for later. Tinfoil hats at the ready? Correct. Tin is hard to locate. So it's hard to use just for tin. If you have tin, you're not going to use it usually just for tin. You're going to use it for bronze. And the oldest artifact that we have that uses tin is actually a bronze item that we have discovered. And it comes from this place in Serbia called Plochnik. Such great words, by the way, in the Balkan Peninsula. So there's our lead wand. This is a piece of a bronze bowl or jar. We're not 100% certain. Lead hat. Led Zeppelin, maybe. But this is a piece of copper. It's from Plochnik, and it's dated to pretty far back for bronze. It's dated to about 4500 BC, which is kind of pushing the boundaries of what we thought bronze actually was. But bronze has tin in it. Tin is one of the metals that makes up copper. So I know we're talking about tin, but I'm showing you this because clearly tin had to have been used prior to this artifact existing. Otherwise, people would not have been able to make bronze, right? Copper, I said tin. This is bronze. The object that we're looking at right now is made out of bronze. But we're talking about tin. I could not find in my research for this stream the oldest purely unique tin item. I saw some references to stuff, but I couldn't pin it down as being legitimate. I don't like to talk about things and try to speak authoritatively unless I found something that's been peer-reviewed and published. So there are some... If you just go Googling tin, people are going to say, tin is the oldest metal that people have ever used, but then they can't produce actual sources that prove that. So I try to stay away from stuff that I feel like might be hyperbole on the internet. And I did have to do a lot of digging for this stuff, metaphorically speaking. I'm not actually mining anything except for data. Rin Tin Tin, he could sniff out the leads, right? So Plochnik, there you go. The oldest tin mine is at a place in Turkey, and it's called the Kestel mine, and I couldn't find a good picture of it. This is the only picture that I could find of the Kestel mine. It's a hole in the ground. What? Something not completely factual on the internet? Let me show you my shocked face. I know. This is the Kestel mine. And I mentioned earlier that we would come back to children. Inside this mine, the mine shafts themselves are very, very narrow. And at the bottom of some of these mine shafts, archaeologists found the skeletons of children. Which is pretty evident that whomever was mining here was using children as labor. And it's pretty brutal, but that's... Yeah, I know. The history gets dark pretty fast. Is tin toxic? I seem to recall tin miners being victims of work-related medical issues. So that's a great question. The tin itself is not toxic, but the minerals and the type of rocks that you find tin in are frequently home to more toxic typed chemicals and minerals. So the tin itself doesn't get you, but if you're digging up tin, you're going to be exposed to all of these other elements down in the mines, and that's going to get you. Yeah, I know. This is what happens in the ancient world. But the magnificent... One thing I could point to you, though, to try to clear up the whole tin being toxic thing. I mean, most of the stuff that we eat that comes in tins wouldn't be able to be used if tin was too toxic. You know, like tin foil itself, you couldn't use that. Or whomever was mining there was hiding dead children in the mine. Oh man, that's even darker. This is some Stephen King stuff now, like an episode of Dateline. Or like the second season of Justified. You just throw the bodies in the mine. I don't think that's no, that happens in the first episode, so that's not a spoiler of Justified. Justified's a great show, though. If you like Timothy Olyphant, Great show. That's true crime. This is history. Come on. History is like the history of people screwing other people over, though. It's pretty hard to get away from in history. People doing horrible stuff to other people. So, smelting evidence for tin, also Plochnik again. Without tin being smelted, you couldn't make that bronze stuff that we talked about. The morality of child labor has changed over time. Surely, kind of mean to disparage the mores of the time from a relatively luxurious standpoint, and that's true. That's true. Times are tougher in the ancient world. Resorting to child labor was probably more of a necessity, but it's pretty evident that the mines of Castell were designed specifically for children. Because of the way that the shafts were cut, they weren't really big enough for a full-sized adult to get down into. And I would also, I'm not trying to be argumentative or try to like point fingers or anything like that. This is a super chill stream. But nobody really needs tin to live. So, I mean, maybe if you're making a living off of selling tin, that would be a thing. But that region has pretty ample natural resources, so this is pretty clearly kids being made to mine. But I completely understand what you're saying, Magnificent, and I absolutely agree. Child labor is a delicate topic. Maybe should not have been so cavalier about that. But so, moving right along. Motvik, it was in Turkey. It is in, and I need to go ahead and show you this image here. I keep referencing Turkey and Turkish mines. This is a really great map that I found that shows ancient deposits of lead, silver, and zinc, also gold and copper. And you can see here, based around just where these are located, again, that we're looking at places that are going to be along geologically active areas. Kestel is right here in south central Turkey. And so that made the children valuable to the mining operators. Just making no. I completely agree with what you're saying, and I didn't think that you were disagreeing with me at all. It's perfectly fine to speak your mind here as long as we're all cool. You can say whatever you want to. You can call me a moron if you want to. If you know that I'm wrong, say so. I'm wrong. I will readily admit that I'm goofed up. And that's the earliest known tin mine. Yeah, that we know of. And it's dated to about 2800 BC. 2800 BC or so. So just a little bit over 4,000 years ago. But you can see here that in these mountain ranges, and especially along this big active plate boundary zone right here, there are lots of these mines. And this region itself actually has kind of a region name in the modern world. It's called the Bolkardog Mining District. So if you went to this region right here in Turkey today, there is still a significantly large amount of mining activity being done. Of course, now today it's being done with modern strip mining techniques and explosions and dynamite and stuff like that. But you can see here these ancient mine locations. This region right here is also going to be important because it's in this region around the modern city of Ergani that the Assyrians are going to set up a pretty important colony, a place called Kanesh, to get copper down into Mesopotamia. Cyprus here also is an important ancient copper location. And one really, really cool thing that has been happening recently, and when I say recently, I mean probably in about the last 15 to 20 years, is isotopic regionalization, which is a really, really fancy name for looking at the chemical composite makeup of particular items and then using isotopes found there and found in areas that we know for a fact that ancient people mined and actually trying to track down the locations of where some of these artifacts would have originally shown up. So in a couple of instances, archaeologists and scientists have found stuff like a bronze artifact, and they can look at the specific chemical and radioactive makeup of the copper and then trace that copper back to a specific mine, because we can do radioisotope readings of that particular mine and kind of overlap that stuff. So this is really, really cool, kind of cutting edge stuff. It hasn't been like universally approved. There's still a lot of questions about how accurate this could be. But especially in a couple of places, this has been proven to be true. For example, there was a shipwreck located in the Mediterranean, and they sort of excavated underwater the hold of the ship, and they found some really big copper bars. And based on the design of the ship, they sort of speculated that this ship came from the island of Cyprus, and it was headed to one of the big trading cities on the Mediterranean coastline when it went down. And then they did some of this radioisotope stuff to copper mines in Cyprus and showed, like, look, we suspected already that this ship came from Cyprus. We know that Cyprus had copper mines. The ingots that we found there radioisotopically matched to the ones over here, so this is pretty kind of proof positive stuff. Isotope ratio studies going to be a big thing. Absolutely. It's going to be a huge thing. And it's already becoming a big thing. There are a lot of places that are still kind of iffy about a lot of it. I don't think that the process is what we might consider like nailed down to the point where we can 100% say for certain. But there is an awful lot and a big growing pile of sort of circumstantial evidence that this stuff is good. This is like when people see the bedrock pattern in your Minecraft screenshots and then use the seed generation with some algorithms to extrapolate the coordinates once it finds a match for that pattern, and then arrive at your base and grief it. Oh man, do they actually do that, Arcadian? That's horrible. Why would somebody grief somebody else on Minecraft? Ugh, are people's lives that small? And if that was offensive to Minecraft griefers, I'm not going to apologize for that. If you get your jollies off of Minecraft griefing, send me a message and we'll talk about some ways to make your life better. The duality of man. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, so let's talk about silver. Oh, silver. Silver is actually one of the prized ancient metals for a lot of reasons. Number one, once they figure out how to do it and how to get it, it's actually pretty plentiful. Number two, it's really, really pretty. It's the most reflective of the native metals. So you're going to be able to use it for really, really bright, shiny stuff. It's used a lot in mirrors, early mirrors, which are effectively just really, really highly polished circles of metal. Silver, one of the only metals you're not allergic to. Oh, that stinks. I mean, I guess you can wear silver and that's cool, but being allergic to metals, that stinks. The Lone Ranger's horse, hi-ho, away. It does suck. Well, I can expect, because lots of things are made out of metal. So the oldest artifact that we have made out of silver comes from Sumeria. I could not locate a picture of it. It is a piece of jewelry that came from a grave site that's dated to about 4000 BC. I'm pretty sure that this actually happens, and this is actually the good date for it. The paper itself that sort of gave the excavation report came from a long time ago, back in the early 1900s. Some of that stuff is a little shady, and some of those items are sort of missing because archaeology back then was basically theft. So not really sure where this stuff is right now. The earliest mining evidence that we have is in that Bolkardag mining district in Turkey, that region that I just showed you. I can share that to you on the actual, like the satellite map here. And you can tell just by looking at this area that it's really, really geologically going on. You've got these really low coastal plains, and then it's this giant, big mountain range. This is part of a larger geological complex that actually runs all the way down this area right here and all the way down into Africa, which becomes the Great Rift Valley, which, of course, is right in here. This is where two big plates are actually pulling apart from each other. Silver is amazing. Its properties are fun, too. Not so much of... Oh, antibacterial. I did know that. So there we are. The first smelting evidence is from about 3500 BC, and it didn't actually originally come from smelting silver. This is a kind of an interesting thing here about silver. The ancient mineral that the people were digging up is called galena. And it looks like this. That's a map. It doesn't look like a map. It looks like this. Looks like the Borg cube. But this is a mixture of silver and a couple of other elements, but you can dig this up pretty easily. It almost looks like bismuth. It does. But the thing about galena is that when you melt it, the silver kind of separates from everything else really easily, and you can kind of get the silver off of it. So this is the best way that ancient people figured out how to get silver, is by smelting out galena and then separating the metals once they've got it melted down. Silver is going to be the standard issue of coinage for most of the ancient world for thousands of years. You're going to find silver coins all over the ancient world. It's very, very common. Pretty ubiquitous metal. But most of the ancient metal that we have of silver comes from refining galena. All right, which leads us to the last one of the native metals, iron. Could have gone with I Am Iron Man. Maybe that would have been a decent title. I don't know. I like the one that we're on. The Riddle of Steel. What is iron? Well, iron is a native metal. The oldest artifacts that we have of iron are from a region of Egypt called Gerza. And I have pictures of these iron beads. And they look like this. Yeah. Yeah, check those out. Those are nice, fancy looking beads there. But they're made out of iron. You can tell that they had holes in them and they were strung on something, but as you might expect, iron oxidizes, and yeah, they look like charcoal. Those particular artifacts from Gerza are dated back to about 3200 BC. And that's going to put them a little bit later, but the reason of digging out iron is that it is a much harder metal. It is the hardest of the metals that we have covered so far, and that's going to mean that you're probably going to need another metal to use to make tools to get the iron out. So you're probably going to need bronze pickaxes and shovels and picks to even get the iron out of the mines to begin with. It's in very hard stone. The metal itself is very dense. So you gotta really go after the iron. So it's a little bit younger in use than some of the other ones that we've been talking about, but it's because it had to wait a little bit for technology to sort of catch up to where it could be done. You're going to start seeing smelting of iron happen at a place in Turkey. And I know we mentioned Turkey again, but again, there's a lot of ancient metalwork going on there. And it is at a place called Kalehuyuk. And I actually found a site picture. Kalehuyuk. So here's some more ancient sandbox for you. This is the dig site, Kalehuyuk. Huyuk, by the way, Hoyuk, is a Turkish word for hill. So all of these huyuks are hills, which are basically ancient tells. You can start to see the archaeology strata over here, and you're digging past all of the more modern stuff to get down to the ancient stuff. This is berm, good old berm. Anyway, that's Kalehuyuk. Okay, so those are the native metals. But we know that ancient people did more than just work around with native metals. They also worked with alloys. And alloys are, as you know, different types of metal mixed together. And this is going to require a new level of technology to use. You're going to have to be able to melt both of those metals. You're going to have to be able to make a fire hot enough to melt both of those metals. And usually what happens is that when you make an alloy, you're going to get some new type of property. You're going to be able to make a metal that's more dense, more ductile, or more usable. You're going to make something that is prettier or better somehow. Otherwise, you wouldn't take the time to make it, right? So the earliest alloy that we have reference to people using is actually meteoric iron. And as it sounds, this is iron that comes from meteors. Technically meteorites if they hit the earth, right? And these are going to be very, very rare, right? How frequently does the earth as we know it get hit by iron meteorites? When's the last time that's happened? Right? It's not very common. But this is also where we get the even better pun, because I told you there was a deeper level. Are you getting the deeper level of the pun now? Where does the meteorite come from? It comes from heaven. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Yup. That's right. Meteorite iron is heaven's ore. So there you go. Another layer of pun. The gods have bestowed it upon us. And that's exactly right. And the stuff that you see made out of meteorite iron is going to be recognized as unique. And the reason I have it here listed under alloy is because it actually is usually an alloy. This meteoric iron or meteorite iron typically is iron mixed with nickel, the metal nickel. And when you find it, it's harder and sturdier than just sort of regular iron, which also means that it takes an extra level of work to actually work meteoric iron. But when you do, you make some pretty wicked cool stuff. For example, this guy. This guy is a dagger that is made out of meteoric iron. And as you can tell, this is some fancy stuff. Most notably recognized by the fact that it has a gold scabbard and a gold hilt. And some of this, the hilt work here also has lapis in it. This is not your commoner's dagger. And in fact, you are considered a Giga Chad if you were able to work it. I don't know about Giga Chad, but you're going to have to be a hoss to carry one of these around. This dagger was found amongst the grave goods of King Tutankhamun in Egypt. And we have a few other meteoric iron weapons and items and stuff like this, but the fact that this particular item and one of the best pieces of this meteoric iron that we have, the fact that we found it in the tomb of a pharaoh, this is showing you that this kind of stuff is not everybody's iron, right? Not everybody gets the really cool stuff that fell out of heaven. The peasants get the regular iron, or not even iron at all. But There you go. So there's meteoric iron for you. Let's move along to bronze. Everybody knows bronze. There's the Bronze Age. It's a pretty big period of time. We've talked about Plochnik, the place in Serbia where the first and oldest bronze item was located. I tried to look for that. Again, I couldn't find... Dun 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 dun. Thank you, Magnificent. I couldn't find any other picture than that that one piece of Plochnik bronze that I showed you earlier. I can show it again here from Plochnik, Serbia. Thank you for the follow. I said that, but I wanted to pause long enough for you to understand that I actually do mean thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Very welcome. So again, this is Plochnik bronze, oldest piece of bronze stuff that we've ever discovered. Ooh, that's getting ahead of ourselves. We don't need to see that yet. Oh, now what could that be? There we go. Plochnik bronze. Boom, ba-da-dum. Okay, that's a Dupondus, but we're not there yet. So bronze, very old. It is made of copper and tin. Copper and tin aren't usually found in the same location. Are all of those mines in Turkey like the Hittite era? No, these are well before the Hittites. Now, the Hittites were digging around in there. So the Hittite era is from around about 2200 BC until, those would technically be Proto-Hittites. The Hittite, really big kingdom like we would know the Hittites, didn't really become a big power until the very end of the Middle Bronze Age, the beginning of the Late Bronze Age. And of course, they collapsed at the end of the Bronze Age around 1100. But these mines are being used even 2,000 years before that. But of course, the Hittites are going to use them as well. The Hittites are going to be the first people that use iron and introduce it into weaponry. And part of that is because they have access to really cool mines in their region. I've lost my place. Oh, copper and tin. Yeah, so copper and tin aren't usually found in the same location, so that means anybody in the Bronze Age that was making bronze stuff was having to trade. There are very, very few places in the ancient world where you can find copper and tin in the same location. Tin, of course, again, is very, very rare, and to create the bronze that most people used in the ancient world took a little bit of rationing. People were working on the ratio between how much bronze to put with how much tin. 9-to-1 or 10-to-2 or 10-to-1 is usually kind of the ratio that a lot of people settled on. Bronze, very pretty stuff, still used in Olympic Games today. So there you go, bronze. All right, what about pewter? You didn't think I was going to talk about pewter tonight, did you? Pewter is a pretty old thing, though. Pewter is a mix of tin, antimony, and some other metal. So tin, antimony, and then usually silver, sometimes lead, sometimes copper. Pewter is great for a lot of things. Number one, pewter is great for making containers for food. Plates, boxes for food, pitchers, flasks. What makes bronze more useful than either copper or tin alone? That's a great question. So copper and tin are both very soft metals. When you blend them together, you get bronze. Bronze is exponentially harder than either copper or tin by itself. The molecular arrangement of bronze, when you mix the copper and tin together, makes it about 8 or 9 times more hard and durable than copper by itself. Copper is more durable than tin is. Tin's soft, very, very soft. It makes it harder. I was trying to get around saying that particular phrase because, of course, that could be clipped and then used against me in future. Please, nobody go clip that. So, pewter. We have evidence of pewter going all the way back to about 1450 BC. This particular item that we found was a flask from Abydos, which is another location down in Egypt. But pewter becomes sort of the go-to for a lot of ancient cultures. The Romans used this extensively. But the problem with ancient pewter is that it's not, first off, it's not the same as the pewter that we use today. Modern pewter is much more refined and goes through a lot of different chemical processes. So the ancient stuff is pretty labor intensive. So it's sort of a high risk, high reward thing where to get this stuff takes a lot of resources and, you know, a lot of work. But when you get it, you get something pretty nice. So it becomes fairly ubiquitous in trade. Usually if you find somebody in kind of like a middle income household or even a poor household that has some versions of metal, you might find a pewter item. It's pretty common even amongst the working class people. It makes it not softer. Yeah, of course, everyone goes to clip that. Please don't go clip that. Anyway, all right, so there's pewter. What about steel? Dun 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 dun. Steel, good old-fashioned steel. It is an alloy. It is iron mixed with carbon. And specifically in the ancient world, this is going to be carbon from a lot of different places. Sometimes it's carbon from charcoal. Sometimes you find carbon in other areas. Like you go smelt some stuff or burn some stuff. Not wood, right? And get other types of ash and mix it in. But iron plus carbon equals steel. And steel is tough stuff. The oldest evidence of any sort of steel item that we've located is at a place called Kaman in Turkey. It's about 1800 BC. And the pieces that we found aren't really actually artifacts. It's sort of like solidified metal droplets where somebody pretty clearly was pouring something into a mold and then some like little rivulets ran out. But the metal rivulets themselves then fell into the dirt and got buried and we dug them up. But running chemical composition tests on those metals, we found out that it contains carbon. And this is probably not something that was just kind of luck because of the amount of carbon that was inside the metal itself. I feel like this lesson could be completed by playing Civ 5. Well, now you know what's going on in the background when you're changing all of those different technologies. You're like, should I upgrade my metallurgy? And you're like, well, I don't know. Have we found a location for this stuff yet? Can we maybe smelt this better? What's going on? Welcome, Moose. Glad to hear that the podcast got off the ground. Moose is part of a podcast with another friend of the channel, Joby Dorr. Everybody should go check it out. Moose, did that actually get loaded up into the podcast realm yet? I know Joby was posting earlier about how difficult it was getting those to load into like Apple's podcast world. Have those been fully uploaded and can people go check them out right now? It's on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Post some links. Let people go dig it up. Go and watch the art condition. Good stuff. I've not had a chance to catch up with the whole thing. I watched the beginning of some of it. And then the hurricane was coming our way and I had to bug out early, so I didn't get to watch all of it because we had to go do stuff like, prepare for potentially being hit by a Category 3 hurricane. It moved. But our Sunday was spent getting gasoline and charging up batteries and going to the grocery store. So I did not get a chance to watch the entire podcast. I would have loved to, but hurricane prep is a bit higher. And now it didn't even come our way. So we've got lots of stuff packed up in the cabinets and lots of ice, and I'm not going to need to charge anything for like a week. Go check out the art condition. It's good stuff. Over here? Is it over here? I always mess up and point. There it is. It's over there. This. Yeah. Go check that out. Good stuff. Okay, so steel. There we are. Art condition. What about brass? What about brass? Well, what is brass? First off, it's copper and zinc. And the extraction process for zinc is pretty tough. And it's hard to get pure enough zinc to make brass. And brass doesn't really become popular until a little bit later on in the ancient world. So you're going to start seeing its use about 200 BC. But it's not really going to catch on until the Romans figure out how to do it. And by about 23 BC, you're going to start seeing these guys show up. And this is a Roman coin called a dupondius. And it is a small denomination coin made out of brass. But when the Romans start using these, they really dig it because it doesn't cost as much to make these as it would to make a silver or a gold coin, clearly. So brass is a lot cheaper and easier to make. When I hear brass, I can only think about brass ensembles and not the metal. I can never keep bronze, brass, and tin straight. Well, bronze is copper and tin. Brass is copper and zinc, and tin is just tin. They're all softer metals. Brass is softer than bronze. Bronze is the hardest. Tin is the softest of them all. Metallurgy. But anyway, this is Roman dupondius. Technically, there are 3 of these, so it'd be dupondii, but nobody's going to correct my Latin, are they? I don't know. Anybody know Latin in the world or in the room? Anybody a Latin fan? I had to learn Latin for my master's so that I could read the Roman legal code, and it was torture. I don't ever want to do that again. Church Latin, not the same. Similar enough. You'd be surprised. Hey, Life of Mamba, how's it going? Hope you're doing well, my friend. Welcome, welcome. We're talking about metal, and not this kind of metal. More like this kind of metal. I'm reminded now, after pointing to my head, of the Adventures of Pete and Pete, whose mother had a metal plate in her head that became part of the plot device. I loved Adventures of Pete and Pete, by the way. Just chilling. Welcome. Chill amongst friends. If you haven't watched The Adventures of Pete and Pete, go try to find those. They're really good stuff. That show is your jam. I love Adventures of Pete and Pete. I have the first 2 seasons on DVD. They did not release season 3 on DVD, but I located a location online to obtain them. I will say it that way. It does hold up really well. Those lessons that you learn there are timeless. So let's talk a little bit about techniques. So we've talked about native metals. We've talked about alloys. Let's talk about techniques. It's a piety type place, Shane. Let's talk about smelting. Everybody's favorite metalworking technique. First off, I've said smelting a lot. We've talked about it already. To recap, smelting is getting metal hot enough so that you can melt it and then pour it into other things. Techniques. Oh. Yeah, so smelting goes along with casting, but you don't have to have a cast to do smelting. You love the smelts. Smelt actually somehow became an insult word in Letterkenny. I don't know if anybody's seen Letterkenny, the TV show. Really funny show. Smelts is... Oh, you're talking about Smelt the Fish. Gesmelt a fish. Not the same. So smelting is heating ore or heating raw native metals so that you can get rid of impurities. And the way that this would work is typically you would go through several different temperatures of heating because different metals melt at different temperatures. And if you're going for a specific temperature, you can actually heat the ore up to that magical temperature and your metal will actually run out of it. And you can collect that metal into an ingot or a cast, and then you can heat something else even further. Perhaps there are multiple different types of metals in that ore, and you can actually get the rest of it out. Or you can just melt the whole thing and then skim stuff off the top, because sometimes when you melt this metal, the sort of impurities and stuff will kind of float up to the top because they are less dense than the actual liquid metal themselves. Then you can scrape that junk off the top, and it leaves you with nice pure metal at the bottom. But this requires heating, and I showed you the picture of the guys with the big tubes that they were blowing in. But there's a great invention along the way, and it is called a bellow, or bellows. And the earliest and most ancient bellows looked like this guy. I am super happy that I found this photo. This is an ancient pot bellows. Now, when you think of bellows in like the modern day terms, what you might think of is the like the kind of accordion thing that looks like this, right? And you or something that you put your foot on and you move it up and down, and it pushes air out. But this ancient bellows worked by using the same principle of pushing air around, but inside of the rim of the pot here, you would have a piece of leather, and it would be on some sort of disc or maybe a piece of very stout pottery that would fit just tight enough so that you couldn't get a seal out from around it, basically to make it more or less airtight. And then you would press that stick up and down in this pot, and it would force air out through this hole here, which you would attach to either a tube or directly to your fire. And that's ancient bellows. So instead of like the accordion thing, you would just kind of be like butter churning it almost, and forcing the air into the fire, which of course interjects more oxygen, which of course makes the fire burn hotter. And this sort of technique is required for ancient smelting. You have to have this to make it work, because the native heat of just burning usually stuff like sticks or grass or even logs isn't really going to get hot enough to melt fire, or to melt fire. Who melts fire? Ugh. To melt metal, dum-dum. Melting fire. That sounds like a fun thing to do in the afternoon. What are you going to do? I'm going to go melt some fire. Oy Gavolta. I melt fire. It's really metal. Melting fire does sound like a really bad, like 1986 hair metal jam. Melting fire. Of course, your small fire wouldn't even melt regular gold. That's a quote from something. Melting fire is some wizard nonsense. Don't meddle with the affair of wizards. There you go. There's a good pun for you. Or a firebender. I am actually watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have been guilted by enough friends. Do you need this for bronze or just iron? You need that for basically any sort of smelting. Any type of metal work where you have to melt it down, you're going to need something like a bellows to introduce more oxygen to the fire. Unless you have a really, really good kiln and you've constructed something that is retaining all of the heat, you're really not going to be able to melt any type of metal. But both bronze and iron. And you're going to need a hotter fire to melt iron than you would to make bronze. The melting point of iron is higher than both the melting point of copper and tin. So you've got to get a really hot fire to melt iron. How long do those bellows last before they got replaced? That's a great question, and we don't find many of them. So they seem to be pretty durable. And what you're working with is pretty much just like a butter churn action, So... and it also doesn't appear that they were used for an overly long period of time when we're talking about, like how long were these used? Maybe just a couple hundred or maybe 300 or 400 years at the maximum, because people then figured out that we really don't even need the pot necessarily. We could just make a big sack out of the leather, and then we could make really big things. So the transition from just kind of blowing into a tube to the pot bellows was a pretty quick one. And then from the pot bellows to like the larger sort of working bellows was also a fairly quick one. So the period of the span of time that the pot bellows were used was not necessarily very big, which is really why I got so excited that I found a good picture of one. Because the picture looked pretty thin. Yeah. So, I mean, they're not going to be beaten up on too terribly much. That's a fair question, though. So they're smelting. But here's something else. What about annealing? Now, what is that thing? I haven't said that one tonight. Annealing is a process that you can use to make things easier to work. And some of these metals that we're talking about, if they are baked or smelted, they can come out really, really hard and solid and difficult to work with, right? You're not going to be able to make them into fine things or small things because they're just so darn stubborn. But if you could anneal it, you can actually make it easier to work with. And so here's what you do. You take the metal after you have made it, and then you heat it up. But you don't heat it up to the point where it would melt again. You get it to this magical little heat level that people in the ancient world figured out. There's a whole term for it today. But you heat it up to just the point where the molecules of that metal start getting a little excited. And then you just leave it in the air and let it cool down very, very slowly. And then you can do that several times. And what you are actually doing in that process is slowly but surely breaking the molecular construction of the individual atomic bonds, and you're making that metal more and more soft. And this is a very slow process that doesn't really show up until a little bit later on, until about the 5th dynasty of Egypt. And we know this because we have really great wall pictures like this one. And what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at a whole bunch of people working stuff. So here we have some people holding something over a fire. And here we have somebody cooling it off. But here we have them putting it over another fire. And here we have them heating it up again. And here we have them cooling it off again and adding stuff to it. So the theory here is that this is actually a mural of early annealing, which is kind of neat. Because as we know from looking at Egyptian artifacts, they really liked to work metal, especially when we see, the big kind of the face masks of things like Tutankhamun, whose burial mask is ridiculously beautiful. It's perfectly shaped. It's got nice features. You can tell that it's a person. If you look at a lot of other Egyptian sculpture that's made out of metal, you can see these really fine details. Well, that works a lot when you make the metal softer and you anneal it. You can actually work it better and easier. So there you are with annealing. But what if you want to do the opposite? What if you want to make it not softer? Notice how I'm not saying what you might want me to say. What if you want to temper that metal? So what do you do if you temper it? Well, you heat that joker up until it's about to melt. You form it into its shape, or you get to the point where it is actually melting and you point it in its shape. And then you quench it. And by quenching it, you cool it very, very rapidly. And you use sometimes different liquids to quench. Sometimes it's just water. Sometimes it's stuff like milk or blood. Sometimes it's pee. Depending on what metal you're working with, the different elements in that quenching can actually help you make that metal more durable. What happens when you quench the metal is that you set the molecules of that metal into a very, very rigid framework. And when you quench it, it sort of like slams it into place. and then you reheat it just a little bit to let things kind of settle into place, and then you let it cool off. But what this does is it makes things really, really, really durable. And if you're going to be making weapons, or if you're going to be making items that have like a high impact, something like a pickaxe or a shovel, you're going to want to temper this. And you can see this in if you've ever watched a late night TV show, tempered steel. You know that kind of stuff. These fancy words that they want to use. $29.99. But wait, if you order right now, it's always P. Yeah, P is used in the ancient world for a lot of stuff. It's really useful. Forged in fire. Right, that kind of stuff. So tempering makes things much more durable. It sets that molecular structure of the metal into a very rigid format, which means that it's going to be able to handle impact more. It's going to be stronger than it would be just naturally. So like if you just naturally smelted iron and poured it into a sword cast and then sharpened it, and then you had a tempered iron blade, the tempered iron blade, even though it's made from roughly the same material, is going to be significantly harder. So you're going to want to use this. And you've seen this happen too. You've been watching a movie and somebody has been banging on something at a blacksmith shop, and somebody walks in and they're like, hey, I need to talk to you. And the blacksmith looks at them and like sticks the thing down in the bucket of water and it goes, shh. That's tempering. Jumps to the scene with P. Well, the thing about P is it's got all sorts of great chemicals in there, like uric acid, which can be used for a lot of stuff, like making leather. Right? Go figure. So the oldest artifact that we have found that was tempered is a pickaxe that came from the region around the Sea of Galilee. That was dated to about 1200 BC. So clearly by about 1200 BC, which is right around the beginning of the Iron Age, you're going to see people recognizing that if you're going to use something with a high impact like a pickaxe, you really want to temper this to make it stronger, right? If you were looking for juvenile play on words, you're in luck. Sorry, everybody. I'm refreshing my quenching liquid with P. Come back later. I love this chat. I love this chat too. It gives me the happies. You all are great. And this has been a great one. So that is the conclusion of my discussion of metallurgy. And I will again admit that when I first got thrown metallurgy as a viewer request, I was a little skeptical. I really didn't know where I was going to go. But I'm pretty excited about how this turned out. I got to talk about a lot of cool stuff, show lots of cool pictures. We got to work in P. Have you ever covered the Bronze Age collapse yet? Yes, we have. It is on a VOD. I believe the... I can tell you what episode number it is. Let me look it up. It is Adventures in History, episode 14, Moose. Collapse of the Bronze Age, episode 14. How is Japanese steel unique in the ancient world? That's a great question. So I didn't go all the way up into what we might consider the postmodern world or anything of that nature. But Japanese steel is unique because of the forging and smithing process. So what the Japanese did was when they made the iron ingots out initially, they would hammer them all out in long strips, and then they would add the carbon, and then they would fold it. And they would beat it out into long, straight shapes again, and then kind of flatten it out and get it hot again, and they would put more carbon and they would fold it again. And so in the process of heating and quenching and adding more carbon and heating and quenching and adding more carbon and then folding it on top of itself, what they were doing is effectively making a composite structure. So think about one piece of paper, if we're looking at it like one piece of paper, right? And if you fold that piece of paper over once, you're going to get something that's a little bit thicker, but not necessarily anything, structurally that better. But imagine what happens when you keep folding that piece of paper. Over time, you're going to get something that's kind of chunky. But because of the way that the Japanese smiths worked it out, because they were beating the layers down back more or less into shape, they were taking that hard, tempered, rigid molecular structure and folding it on top of itself, and then folding it again and folding it again and folding it again to create something that was significantly more durable, because of the frequent addition of carbon and also other elements. They would not just add carbon. They would also add a couple of other things. And one of the things that is neat about Japanese sword making is that some of the big masters did not ever really reveal their entire process, because that's how they made their money, right? So that the folding process and the repetitive addition of carbon and heating and folding is what makes Japanese steel, especially Hanzo steel, for those of you that might know that reference, particularly great. Hanzo is not actually a real person, by the way. Bud's Hanzo sword. Gotta love Hanzo swords, right? Oh, Tarantino. All right, ladies and gents. So that is wrapped up for me. Also, mind you, when they say folded over 1,000 times, it doesn't mean that they did it 1,000 times, but it had over 1,000 folds. Right. Hanzo and Genji were originally a single character, pretty much. Those early mines in the Balkans, Asia Minor, and Caucasus, too early to know what was going on politically. For a lot of them, yes. A lot of those mines were actually being used prior to any sort of organized political entity. Those would have probably been used during the very, very beginning of the Neolithic Revolution, when people had just figured out how to make enough food to provide for themselves. So most of that stuff is happening around the 7,000, 6,000 BC range, which is when domestication is first starting up, when people are first figuring out how to do agriculture. Some of the regions hadn't even completely settled down yet. Like, you have the Natufian culture down in the Levant region that's semi-nomadic, does a little bit of agriculture, but still does hunter-gatherer stuff as well. But that's well too early for us to really have a completely strong idea of what they were politically. The settlements at that time were probably only maybe 50 to 100 people at maximum. You're not really going to have even what we would call a city. Villages, or you might stretch the word town out of some of these. Cumulative folds, thank you. So what's the riddle of steel then? Original concept art for Project Titan of Hanzo Genji. I'm going to have to look at that. Hopefully this doesn't crash the computer. Oh, well, look-a there. I did not know that. Are you calling me a Hanzo main? I've heard that's an insult. Have we covered ancient literature? We do talk about literature a lot. When we talk about individual cultures, I always try to throw something about their writing in there. So if you're talking about like the development of literature as in genres, like the history of mythologies or the history of historical chronicles or anything like that, we haven't covered that in specific. But if you find any of the individual groups of people that we talk about, I always try to talk about literature. And especially when we talk about religions as well, I always try to include information about the scriptures and stuff like that. We have not talked about ancient music very much at all. You're a Maeve main, and you like slaying Genji. Oh, we've asked to let's let the puppy of war. Let me call the puppy. Give me. Oh, here's the puppy. Come and see me. Come here. Where are you going, silly? Come here. Where are you going? No, come over here. Come here. Come here. Come and see me. Hey. Hey. No, come right here. Come here. Oh, there's the puppy. And there she goes again. Where are you going? Come here. Come here. People want to see you. Hey, come right here. She's so excited. Come here. Come and see me. Come here. Come here. Come here. Here. Can I have the chicken? This will get you up here. Come on. Come on. Come on. It's okay. Come on. Come up here. There we go. There's the puppy. There's the puppy. This is Kaylee. She probably just woke up from a nap. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the sugars. Oh, such a good puppy. Hello. What are you doing? You want to look right here? Look right here. No, look right here. There we go. There's the puppy. Hello, Kaylee Poo. Oh, yes. There we go. Okay. So there's the puppy. Yes, she wants you to look at the chicken, but you're not ever supposed to touch the chicken. She probably just woke up. When she wakes up, she gets very excited for some reason. She's like, hey, things are happening. Let me roll back up. I think I missed some chat. We have not covered completely just ancient literature, maybe the paladins. I was curious about how many tales correlate with each other. Oh, so you want to do like comparative mythology. That would be an interesting one. I have not done anything specifically about that. Excited puppy. Rake 3 things. Top 3 medals. Oh, that's a good one. Probably heavy metal, black metal, hair metal. Hair metal, cough metal, glam metal, adamantium, vibranium, cortosis. Arcadian, if you... Of the ones that we covered tonight, the ones that I would think are the coolest in my opinions are... I really like silver. So I'd probably put that in a number 3 spot. Silver is really ubiquitous in the ancient world. I have some silver artifacts that I'll show at a later date that should be in a museum, but I obtained legally. I have documentation of export, so I have obtained them legally. And I'll show them later on in streams. I don't want to break them out right now. Silver probably would be number 3. I'm going to have to put bronze at number 2 because I really love the Bronze Age. It is one of my favorite history periods. Historical concepts of the Bronze Age are fascinating to me. I spent a long time on the Bronze Age in the chat and the stream here. But if I had to pick number 1, I would pick meteoric iron. If I had some ancient thing made out of meteoric iron, that would be wicked flippin' cool. I would have a cow if I was able to find something like that. Where does brass fit in the metal timeline? Brass is going to be used sparingly until about 200 BC. This is where we first really start figuring out, and the Romans are the ones that really get this going. The Romans are going to figure out how to do brass on a wide scale, and then by the early parts of the AD period, they're printing those coins, those brass dupondius that I showed you. They're printing those out by the thousands. Copper, between copper and iron, meteoric iron is got to be the top though. The Bronze Age was far less goofy than the Silver Age. Most of our characters took the predominant. Now we're talking about comic books, and I don't mind doing that either. Silver Age is probably my favorite comic book age. I know that probably betrays a lot of people that might be Gold Age purists. I like Gold Age comics. I had a few back when I was really seriously collecting. But Silver Age is where the comic book heroes that I grew up really came from. You know, like Hal Jordan, Showcase 22, Flash, Showcase number 4. I'm a giant comic book fan, by the way. Giant nerd. All right. Anybody else want to drop some channel points? I'm going to go over to Twitch, and I'm going to set up. Oh, I'm going to shut that up first because I don't want to hear myself talk to myself. That would be weird. Flash. Ah. Not that Flash. It's time to set up a poll. Spider-Man. Oh. I like Spider-Man. All right. So we get to pick a new topic because it is that time. We're going to make a new poll. Our new poll is, what do we cover next? And as is our want, we're going to carry over the number 2 winner from the last time. I don't know enough. I've never played the game Riddle of Steel to begin with. I do like Conan. I've read a lot of the books. I guess the answer to the Riddle of Steel is that it's just like humans. If you leave it alone and don't work with it, it becomes brittle and old. But if you train it and keep it strong, it will protect you. The riddle from the movie. When Captain America throws his mighty shield. To drive my foes before me and hear the lamentations of their women. Okay, so about to start the poll. What I need from our loving audience are suggestions for the next viewer request episode, which will take place week after next. So our second place winner last time, or second place position last time, was astrology. So we're carrying that one over. History of tacos. I really don't know what I would do with that moose. Well, astrology is on there because it was second place last time. See, here's the thing. If I put history of tacos on there, you all are going to vote for that hands down, and everybody is going to go for it. And people are going to get super excited about the history of tacos. Okay, fine. I mean, it's viewer selection. Chopsticks? I don't think that's going to be enough to do something on. Chopsticks is pretty specific. People use chopsticks for a lot of stuff, but it's like the history of chopsticks is they came up with chopsticks in about Shang Dynasty China in 2200 BC, and they've used it since then. I don't know how much more I could get out of history of chopsticks. History of eating utensils. Okay. I still don't even know how much I could get out of that. What did they use before that? Their hands? Yeah, pretty much. Mythological histories of ancient cities. You're going to have to be a little bit more specific of the, like where did these cities come from? If you could give me a region on that one, KP, I would consider that. Like Romulus and Remus. Oh, okay. Okay. All right, I don't have enough. Okay. All right. So here we go. So there's your poll. If you go above the chat and click the little down caret. See, I can't, Motvic. I can't, Motivic. Motivic. I just realized that I haven't actually said your name. 2 burgers and a shake. I can't do any of my own suggestions because it's a viewer request show. So I have to let the viewers pick. I am bound by my own rules here. Astrology is leading. That's actually kind of making me a little happy. I don't know what I would do with History of Tacos. I would do it. I would do all of this, by the way. It's a viewer request episode. You get to decide what we do. I have no say-so over this. I am bound by your decisions. So everybody go vote. It's above your chat window. You click the little down arrow. Everybody gets a vote. You get to pick whatever you want to. This is rough. You'd research Mexican street food and then become a chef in the process. How much of history is actually fibbed? Probably more than we want to admit. Maybe we should band together and do a survey of random asinine topics. I actually kind of have an angle on what I would do with tacos. And I could do utensils, and I could do mythological origins of cities. I could do all of these. I know where I would end up. It would be fun. And, you know, I just told you all at the beginning that I didn't know what I was going to do with metallurgy. And I think it came out okay. History of Hyperborea. I don't know if I'm down with doing history of fantasy worlds. If I did, I would be doing the history of Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, with commentary on funny inaccuracies and analogs. Ooh, astrology. Oh, did we win? All right, so history of astrology is the next one. And the other 3 are all tied at 1. So I guess that means I get to pick what gets held over next time. And just to spite myself, I'm going to vote that I hold over History of Tacos. Because I think I would take that as a challenge. And we'll do that as next time. So we'll carry tacos over. How about that? Joke with me. Okay. Alrighty. So now we will do the history of astrology. Sassy pants. I am a sassy pants. Let's see who we could raid. Got lots of options. We've got Cat Videos, who we've raided recently. So Cat Videos is there. Cave Geek. We've got Octopolis. Octopolis is an illustrator. His wife is actually an archaeologist, though. And they do streams together sometimes where he will be doing art and she will be talking about archaeology. Let me see if she's around tonight.
Yeah, so one of the things they want is they want the silhouette of Atlanta in the background.
I think they're just doing drink and draw. But he's drawing a nice skyline, so we could maybe raid Octopolis. Bubba World Comics is going. Let's see what Bubba World Comics is drawing. Apparently might be on the way out, because it's okay, yeah, he is actually on the way out, so he just closed, so there's that. And we have NeoRealms. NeoRealms is working on his video game. Or we could take a request. Anybody have any person that they follow that I might recognize that we could go raid? We don't have to do a raid either if we just want to call it a night. I know it's kind of late. I actually quite far over my my stated period of time. Or I could just decide because no one's talking. Let's see what Cave is doing. Cave looks like he's packing up orders. That might not be the best one. Let's go raid Octopolis. We've never raided Octopolis. History of pickling food.
Skyline. That's hilarious.
Octopolis is drawing a cityscape. Yeah, let's go raid Octopolis. He's a cool guy. We'll have fun there. So I'm gonna click the start raid button. Bum ba da bum. I am going to tell you all thank you for coming by. Had a great time. I really appreciate everybody hanging out. Thanks for all of the follows. Thanks for all of the subs. A special thank you to Buttery Smooth, who came in and dropped crap tons of bits and gave away free subs. That guy's great. All of you are great. I'm not trying to pick favorites. Everybody's a great person. I'm going to be back on Thursday night for our regularly scheduled Adventure in History. We'll be talking about the religion Jainism, which is a really fascinating religion that I don't think a lot of people know very much about. So come back and check out Jainism. It's a really fascinating religion. I'm going to have fun talking about it. You want to preach about Shainism? Oh, let's not inflate my ego and give me a religion. But I will see everybody hopefully on Thursday. You all have a wonderful night, and I'll see you next time.